Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
Back during the Christmas season, between Christmas and New Year, I was visiting my dad and my stepmom. They were living in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I'm in Columbus, Ohio, about 3.5 hours south of there. We kind of had a little tradition. We would go to my wife's grandmother's, who was in Toledo, Christmas Eve. And then Christmas Eve night, we would drive up to my parents and be at my parents for Christmas Day, and then for a series of days afterwards. Neither here nor there, doesn't really matter, but I was there. My stepmom, my father was retired. My stepmom worked for Pfizer. She was a statistician for Pfizer for a number of years. At any rate, they're familiar with the things I do, and my stepmom handed me an article. And the article was from MIT Sloan Management Review, and the article was entitled, "What Creates Energy in Organizations?" And that just totally piqued my interest because, well, I run an organization. And within that organization, there are chapters of people, and each of those chapters is an organization. And so I just sat and I just consumed this article. And it wasn't very long. You can go ahead and you can look it up. What Creates Energy in Organization, MIT Sloan Management Review, July 15th, 2023. So I read the article. I was certainly intrigued. I grew up in Michigan. I'm a fan of the University of Michigan football team, their sports, which is odd because I went to Ohio State for law school. A whole nother conversation. But one of the authors, one of the people who were involved in the research in the paper was Dr. Wayne Baker, who's been a guest on this program a couple of times. And he's a professor of sociology in the business school at University of Michigan. And so I'm like, wow, I'm in Ann Arbor, and this guy's like a stone's throw away. And I've never met him in person, but we've had conversations. And again, he's been on this program a couple of times. Probably be back at some point in time. At any rate, I was so taken by the paper, by the study, that I presented it, or aspects of it, at the first annual leadership conference within AmSpirit Business Connections, and that was in early 2005. So I had a chance to read and digest and really think about it. And they did this study within some large organizations, some governmental organizations. They did it within a global strategy consulting firm, large professional services firms. They did it with a major credit card company, and they also did their study with a group of engineers for a large petrochemical organization. Got a lot of data. They did a lot of surveys, did a lot of interviews, gathered a lot of different information. At any rate, what they determined is that there are really 5 ways to create energy in organizations. And I'm going to quickly review all 5 and then really center on one, because I think one is really pertinent to this particular podcast, the topic of this podcast, which is really professional relationships, business networking. First thing, people are energized by interactions in which a compelling vision is created. There's got to be a vision. The leader's got to have a vision. The organization's got to have a vision. The second is people are energized by interactions in which they can contribute meaningfully. In other words, you need to get everybody needs to be contributing. Everybody needs to feel like they're contributing to the greater good of what that vision is. The third thing, people are energized when they are fully engaged in the interaction. And we're going to talk on that because I think that's the important one. People are energized in interactions where it's marked by progress, where they feel like their efforts are moving somewhere. And then the last is people are energized in interactions when hope becomes part of the equation. When they realize that there's a worthy objective that they're they're moving towards, and it's something that's meaningful to them, if you will. In the paper, towards the end of the paper, and again, it's not a long paper, there's a section called 8 Decisions That Increase Energy. And that really caught my eye. And I've read this article, and recently it's really kind of stuck out to me because these things really interplay with relationships. And you think of the 5 things I mentioned: having a vision, giving everybody a role, engaging people meaningful within relationships is what I'll call it, progress, and then instilling hope. I think the relationship aspect of it is probably the most important. People need to feel like they belong, and where they don't feel like they belong, even if there's a vision and they're kind of contributing towards it, I don't know. It's kind of like somebody who's on a football team and they're the 18th string, and coach doesn't even know who they are. You know, team can have a vision, and they hold a blocking dummy in practice, which somebody needs to do that, and the team's doing well, so they feel progress, and there might be hope that it's leading somewhere. But if the coach doesn't know who they are, then they have a relationship, and most people don't know who they are, it's not going to be a lot of fun. So anyhow, I think these 8 decisions, or these 8 questions, are really important. So I'm going to go through these quickly here. Do you weave relationship development into work and day-to-day activities? Is relationships important part of your organization? And we all have organizations. Let me stop and say that right here. You could say, well, I'm a solopreneur, I don't have an organization. Well, you do have an organization. It's called your network. Your network is a very informal organization. No, you're not handing out W-2s at the end of the year and having a company party or anything like that necessarily, but it is a very informal organization, and so these things matter. Most people, however, have other people within their, most people aren't solopreneurs, right? Most people have other people. I have people working with me at AmSpirit Business Connections. I know of other people who have little businesses, and they might have an assistant. They might have a couple of VAs helping them. It's all part of an organization. So relationship development needs to be part of it. Do you do what you say you're going to do? People tend to lose trust when they hear you saying you're going to do something and then not doing it, not following through. They don't want to be part of that. I don't. In the study, it talks about, again, they did a lot of interviews, and they share an anecdote of somebody who said they had a direct report who was continually saying they were going to do X, Y, and Z, and so they're going to the other people are doing A, B, and C in support of X, Y, and Z, and X, Y, and Z wasn't getting done, and so then all of a sudden it's like, why are we doing A, B, and C? It doesn't make any sense, So we need to do the things we say we're going to do. It's a matter of building trust. Do you address tough issues with integrity? That's a hard one. It's easy to say, well, I have integrity and I'm going to address issues with integrity. It's easy to say that until you come across that issue. And I got to be honest, I'm not perfect with it. I'm not. It becomes very complicated sometimes. Very complicated. And it's, it can be very challenging, but it's something that people, again, it comes down to trust. People need to realize or feel that they can trust you, and that there's not a sense of favoritism there. Do you look for possibilities or just identify constraints? People want to be associated with those who are can-do sorts of people. Yeah, we can get that done. It's going to be hard. We'll get it done. As opposed to, yeah, I don't know if we can ever get that done. I don't know. That's kind of demoralizing. So in your networks, in your organization, you need to be that person who's always looking for possibilities, always kind of on your toes, ready to kind of, on the balls of your feet, ready to race forward with whatever it is. And I get it. It's not, there are times where that again can be a challenge. I can think of any number of times just in the last year where it's, you kind of get in that, oh, woe is me, just things are piling up, and you need to kind of work through those. When you disagree with someone, do you focus attention on the issues at hand rather than the individual? And that's, none of this is personal, or none of this should be personal, but to an extent it is, right? If you get passed up for a promotion, or you don't get picked to be somebody's client, it's business. I get it, but it's also personal. But it can't be directed at the individual. It's got to be more. It's got to be more focused on, okay, it's really this situation, or we're going with somebody else. It's not just you. Are you cognitively and physically engaged in meetings and conversations? I once had a boss. He would call you in and you want to talk to you, and he's always packing a bag, always getting ready to go, never really sitting listening to you. He would say he was listening. Oh, I'm listening, but he would be turning around, packing a bag, and looking for stuff. And it's like, you can say you're listening, you're hearing me, but you're not really listening to me. And it was annoying. It was annoying. So we need to be that person that when we're having conversations, we're really kind of dialed in. That's what engages people with us. Are you flexible in your thinking, or do you force others to come to your way of thinking? You know what? That's again, that's a hard one, right? Especially in the entrepreneurial world, because we all are very invested in the things that we do, and we have a vision as to what we want to do. It's a hard thing at times to sit back and say, you know what, I need to really listen to what other people are saying. I really need to kind of think this thing through. And I can point to times in my life where I haven't done that, and I can point to times where I have. But it's something that we need to keep in mind, that we need to be thinking about, being open-minded with respect to what others have to say. And the eighth question here is, do you use your own expertise appropriately? And that really kind of ties into the last thing, with flexibility and thinking. Sometimes it can be easy to get stuck in, I know better, I've got experience, I've got this degree, I've done this before, I know the parties involved. It's easy to kind of get stuck in that thinking and be dismissive of people, whereas we can certainly better serve the people around us if we're willing to say, you know what, this is what I think. This is what I think based on what I know, but I would be interested in your perspective based on what you know. And you still may come back to what you're thinking, especially if you're in charge. You got to make the decision. It's in AmSpirit Business Connections. It's the decisions are funded by, I own the business, my money. And so ultimately, I've got to be responsible for those decisions, and I've got to make the decision. But I need to take feedback from people as well. As Matt Ward once shared with me, he's one of our franchisees. He said, when I used to coach youth football, I would tell the parents, listen, if you got suggestions, give me your suggestions. Put them in a little suggestion box, metaphorically. Put them in there. I'll consider them all. Doesn't mean I'm going to take them, but I'll consider them all. So anyhow, you get a chance, check out the article, What Creates Energy in Organizations. You want to energize your network. You want to energize your place of work. Think about those 5 criteria, but especially think about how you're building a relationship with the people who are in your network. How you interact with those people is probably the most important aspect of that, of those 5 things.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.